Saturday, July 8, 1944, as the Allied armies were still consolidating their fragile foothold in Normandy, General George S. Patton stood apart from the front lines, officially sidelined yet intensely present in the unfolding drama of World War II, carrying with him a reputation that concealed far more than it revealed. Patton was widely known for his profanity, his pistols, and his aggressive speeches, but those visible traits masked a carefully constructed command persona designed to influence morale, enemy perception, and political survival within the Allied coalition during World War II. One of Patton's most closely guarded realities was that his apparent recklessness was underpinned by exhaustive preparation, as he spent countless hours studying terrain, enemy doctrine, and historical campaigns, often reading late into the night during World War II. Patton believed deeply in reincarnation, privately stating that he had fought in earlier wars across centuries, a belief that influenced his sense of destiny and urgency during World War II, though he carefully concealed this conviction from most of his peers. Despite his public image as a battlefield tyrant, Patton maintained a private habit of writing poetry, using verse as a means of organizing thought and managing stress amid the pressures of World War II. Patton's famous emphasis on speed was not merely instinctive, but derived from his study of logistical mathematics, understanding that disruption of enemy supply systems mattered more than destruction of frontline units in World War II. Few outside his inner circle knew that Patton carefully moderated his reported losses in communications upward, believing that higher casualty figures justified continued offensive freedom during World War II. Patton privately distrusted many Allied commanders, but he understood coalition warfare demanded restraint, leading him to vent frustrations almost exclusively in his diaries rather than official correspondence during World War II. His relationship with Dwight D. Eisenhower was more calculated than emotional, as Patton recognized Eisenhower's political importance and adjusted his behavior accordingly to preserve operational relevance in World War II. Patton deliberately cultivated a reputation among German intelligence as the Allies' most dangerous commander, fully aware that enemy fear could shape strategic decisions during World War II. This reputation campaign included controlled leaks, exaggerated troop movements, and conspicuous personal behavior, all intended to reinforce German misperceptions during World War II. Patton's command philosophy prioritized initiative at the lowest levels, quietly instructing subordinates to act first and explain later, a principle that clashed with formal doctrine but proved effective in World War II. Contrary to his speeches, Patton did not believe casualties were meaningless, privately agonizing over losses and frequently writing letters of condolence that never reached public view during World War II. Patton's intense focus on discipline masked his belief that discipline was a psychological tool rather than a moral absolute, designed to create predictability under chaos in World War II. He held a private contempt for rigid timetables, viewing them as planning aids rather than constraints, and regularly violated them when battlefield conditions shifted during World War II. Patton's operational planning often included multiple unofficial branches, enabling rapid adaptation without seeking approval, a habit he concealed to avoid political backlash during World War II. Despite public bravado, Patton feared strategic stalemate more than enemy resistance, believing that prolonged equilibrium favored Germany in World War II. Patton's understanding of armored warfare extended beyond tanks, emphasizing combined arms coordination, air support, and psychological shock during World War II. He privately criticized Allied air commanders for overestimating bombing's decisive impact, believing ground maneuver ultimately determined outcomes in World War II. Patton maintained an extensive personal intelligence network, drawing insights from junior officers, enlisted men, and even captured documents bypassing formal channels during World War II. This informal intelligence often reached him faster than official reports, allowing preemptive decisions that appeared instinctive but were deeply informed during World War II. Patton's diaries reveal persistent frustration with political oversight, which he believed diluted military effectiveness, though he publicly accepted civilian control during World War II. He carefully staged battlefield appearances to maximize visibility without unnecessary exposure, understanding the symbolic value of presence during World War II. Patton's belief in momentum extended to morale management, as he frequently rotated exhausted units forward briefly to maintain a sense of progress during World War II. Behind closed doors, Patton acknowledged the limitations of American forces, particularly in early war coordination, adjusting expectations accordingly during World War II. Patton's treatment of Allied civilian populations was guided less by ideology than by logistical necessity, prioritizing cooperation to sustain advance during World War II. He privately criticized racial segregation within the U.S. Army, recognizing its inefficiencies, though his views remained constrained by contemporary norms during World War II. Patton's interactions with Black American units reflected pragmatic respect for combat performance, despite contradictory public remarks recorded during World War II. His belief in deception extended inward, as Patton often misled his own staff about intended axes of advance to preserve surprise during World War II. Patton's emotional volatility was partly theatrical, used to jolt complacent officers, though it occasionally escaped his control during World War II. He feared irrelevance more than defeat, driving his relentless pursuit of action even when political consequences loomed during World War II. Patton's study of enemy psychology led him to exploit German adherence to doctrine, attacking expectations rather than strength during World War II. He understood that German command culture valued permission over initiative, shaping his emphasis on rapid exploitation during World War II. Patton believed that hesitation invited scrutiny from superiors, prompting decisive movement even under uncertainty during World War II. His disdain for defensive warfare stemmed from belief that static posture surrendered initiative, a lesson reinforced by early World War II campaigns. Patton's insistence on ceremonial discipline concealed his understanding that ritual reinforced cohesion under stress during World War II. He carefully managed press access, cultivating selected correspondence to shape public narrative without revealing operational details during World War II. Patton's approach to logistics emphasized forward stockpiling, accepting inefficiency to preserve tempo during World War II. He privately doubted Allied ability to sustain prolonged high-intensity operations, reinforcing his belief in rapid conclusion during World War II. Patton's confidence masked acute awareness of American inexperience compared to German veterans, influencing his emphasis on shock and speed during World War II. He recognized the moral dimension of command, believing confidence could substitute for experience in critical moments during World War II. Patton's belief in fate coexisted with rigorous planning, a duality that shaped his leadership during World War II. His correspondence reveals awareness that history would judge him harshly or generously based on outcomes rather than intent during World War II. Patton's willingness to accept personal risk contrasted with his caution regarding strategic exposure, a balance refined over years during World War II. He understood that visibility could deter hesitation among subordinates, reinforcing his presence near decisive points during World War II. Patton's use of symbolism extended to uniform and equipment, consciously crafting an image of inevitability during World War II. He believed that war was fundamentally psychological, with material means serving morale rather than replacing it during World War II. Patton's secrecy extended to his health, concealing physical pain to maintain command authority during World War II. He maintained detailed after-action notes, not for reports, but for personal learning, continuously refining methods during World War II. Patton's private reflections reveal admiration for competent enemies, respecting German operational skill even while opposing them during World War II. He believed respect enhanced effectiveness, shaping his approach to professional warfare during World War II. Patton's understanding of timing proved decisive, exploiting moments when enemy cohesion faltered during World War II. He recognized that success created political risk, as victories amplified scrutiny during World War II. Patton's insistence on forward command posts risked capture but reinforced responsiveness during World War II. He valued adaptability over doctrine, viewing manuals as starting points rather than rules during World War II. Patton's private doubts about post-war order hinted at his awareness that military victory did not guarantee political stability after World War II. He believed that decisive action shortened suffering, justifying risk during World War II. Patton's legacy rests not only on battles, but on ideas quietly tested and refined under pressure during World War II. His secrets were not conspiracies, but calculated choices shaped by experience, fear, ambition, and belief during World War II. As the war progressed, these hidden dimensions increasingly shaped outcomes, even as public perception lagged behind reality in World War II. Patton remained convinced that understanding war required understanding people, a lesson reinforced repeatedly during World War II. His methods reflected a belief that clarity of intent mattered more than certainty of outcome during World War II. Patton's command style evolved as circumstances changed, contradicting the myth of inflexibility during World War II. He viewed mistakes as tuition, learning rapidly and moving forward without hesitation during World War II. Patton's operational tempo often outpaced analysis, forcing enemies into reaction rather than decision during World War II. He believed that once initiative was seized, it must never be surrendered, even briefly, during World War II. Patton's actions during the war reflected an ongoing internal struggle between restraint and impulse during World War II. His private writings suggest awareness that greatness demanded sacrifice beyond personal comfort during World War II. Patton understood that war rewarded those who acted decisively within uncertainty, a principle he embodied throughout World War II. These concealed elements of Patton's leadership reveal a figure far more complex than legend suggests, shaped by history even as he shaped it during World War II. As World War II unfolded toward its final stages, Patton's hidden strategies, beliefs, and calculations continued to influence events far beyond what appeared in headlines, leaving layers of intent and consequence still examined decades later. The closing months of World War II intensified Patton's internal contradictions, as his drive for action collided increasingly with political caution imposed from above, forcing him to navigate a narrowing space between operational opportunity and diplomatic restraint. As Allied forces advanced deeper into Germany, Patton's private frustration grew over restrictions on maneuver, which he believed squandered fleeting chances to dismantle remaining German cohesion during World War II. He interpreted the slowing pace not as military necessity, but as political choreography, shaped by post-war considerations that, in his view, had already begun to overshadow battlefield realities in World War II. Patton's diaries from this period reveal a growing preoccupation with the Soviet Union, viewing Red Army advances with suspicion and interpreting them through the lens of future conflict rather than Allied cooperation during World War II. He believed that German resistance in the West was collapsing faster than officially acknowledged, and that delay risked allowing another power vacuum to form at the war's end in World War II. Patton's outspoken views were tempered only by his awareness that public dissent would end his career, reinforcing his reliance on private writing as an outlet during World War II. His interactions with senior commanders became more guarded, marked by calculated compliance rather than genuine agreement as World War II entered its decisive phase. Despite his criticisms, Patton continued to execute orders with precision, demonstrating a professional discipline that contrasted with his public image during World War II. He increasingly focused on unit morale, sensing fatigue and emotional depletion after years of combat that statistics failed to capture in World War II. Patton adjusted his speeches accordingly, shifting from aggressive exhortation to reassurance, though maintaining the language of momentum during World War II. Behind the scenes, he pressed for recognition of frontline realities, emphasizing supply strain, personnel exhaustion, and the limits of continuous advance in World War II. Patton's understanding of operational exhaustion extended to the enemy, as he believed German forces were nearing psychological collapse, even where physical resistance persisted during World War II. He viewed surrender not merely as defeat, but as a rational choice once belief in victory evaporated, a pattern he observed repeatedly in World War II. Patton's approach to prisoners reflected this understanding, emphasizing swift processing to prevent regrouping or resistance during World War II. As victory approached, Patton grew increasingly concerned about historical interpretation, aware that narrative framing would shape legacy more than operational nuance after World War II. He worried that political controversies would overshadow battlefield competence, a fear reinforced by earlier reprimands during World War II. Patton's relationship with the press became more cautious, limiting spontaneous remarks that could be misinterpreted or weaponized in the closing months of World War II. He increasingly delegated media interaction to trusted officers, preserving focus on command responsibilities during World War II. Patton's belief in symbolic victory extended to ceremonial moments, viewing flags, parades, and formal surrenders as tools of closure for troops during World War II. He understood that psychological transition from war to peace required ritual acknowledgement of sacrifice during World War II. Patton's respect for professional soldiers on both sides informed his insistence on order during occupation duties, resisting revenge impulses during World War II. He viewed discipline as essential not only in combat, but in victory, preventing moral disintegration during World War II. Patton's skepticism toward prolonged occupation stemmed from belief that armies were instruments of decision, not administration, a distinction sharpened during World War II. He privately doubted that military governance could resolve political instability, anticipating challenges that would follow World War II. Patton's frustration with denazification policies reflected his belief that competence, not ideology alone, determined administrative effectiveness after World War II. He feared that purges would create chaos, undermining recovery and stability in defeated regions of World War II Europe. These views, controversial even then, were recorded cautiously in personal notes rather than formal statements during World War II. Patton's understanding of history influenced his thinking, drawing parallels with post-World War I outcomes that he believed had sown future conflict. He interpreted his role not merely as a battlefield commander, but as a witness to historical cycles unfolding during World War II. Patton's sense of urgency intensified as surrender approached, believing unresolved tensions were being deferred rather than resolved during World War II. He continued to press subordinates for readiness, insisting that discipline and preparedness mattered until the final day of World War II. Patton rejected complacency, warning that accidents and lapses could still claim lives even after formal victory during World War II. His insistence on continued vigilance reflected awareness that war ended unevenly, with danger persisting beyond declarations in World War II. Patton's personal exhaustion became more evident, though he concealed it behind routine and ritual during World War II. He relied increasingly on habit to maintain control, using structured schedules to counter fatigue during World War II. Patton's internal conflict between relief and restlessness marked his final months, as the absence of battle removed the framework that had defined him during World War II. He struggled with inactivity, finding peace less demanding but more disorienting than combat during World War II. Patton's belief in destiny resurfaced strongly at war's end, interpreting survival and loss through metaphysical reflection shaped by World War II. He viewed the war as a chapter rather than a conclusion, sensing that unresolved struggles lay ahead beyond World War II. Patton's interactions with junior officers became more reflective, offering advice rooted in experience rather than exhortation during World War II. He emphasized judgment over bravery, patience over impulse, lessons refined through the crucible of World War II. Patton's final evaluations of his own performance were harsh, focusing on missed opportunities rather than victories during World War II. He measured success not by territory gained, but by decisions made under pressure, a standard shaped by World War II realities. Patton's understanding of leadership matured into acceptance of limitation, recognizing that even decisive commanders operated within constraints during World War II. He acknowledged that control was always partial, shaped by chance, enemy action, and political context during World War II. Patton's hidden reflections reveal a commander grappling with ambiguity, far removed from the certainty projected in speeches during World War II. As the immediate demands of combat receded, these concealed dimensions became more pronounced, shaping his outlook in the aftermath of World War II. The complexity of Patton's character, long obscured by legend, continued to evolve as the consequences of World War II extended into an uncertain future. The transition from combat command to post-war responsibility deepened Patton's sense of displacement, as the structures that had governed urgency and decision during World War II dissolved into administrative routines that offered little clarity or purpose. Patton observed that victory introduced a different kind of disorder, one defined not by enemy fire, but by political ambiguity, shifting authority, and moral uncertainty rooted in the unresolved aftermath of World War II. He struggled to reconcile his belief in decisive endings with the reality that wars often concluded messily, leaving questions unanswered and tensions unresolved after World War II. Patton's writings from this period reflect growing impatience with bureaucratic procedures, which he viewed as substitutes for leadership rather than expressions of it, a contrast sharpened by his experience in World War II. He believed that prolonged administrative control risked eroding military discipline, as soldiers trained for combat were repurposed into roles unsuited to their formation during World War II. Patton worried that the erosion of purpose would damage morale more deeply than combat losses had during World War II. He frequently remarked that soldiers understood danger better than ambiguity, a lesson drawn from years of command in World War II. Patton's reflections turned increasingly philosophical, questioning whether modern war could ever produce lasting resolution given the scale and complexity revealed by World War II. He noted that technological advancement had outpaced political wisdom, creating destructive capacity without corresponding restraint during World War II. Patton feared that the lessons of the conflict would be selectively remembered, reduced to slogans rather than internalized principles after World War II. He believed that future leaders might imitate tactics without understanding context, misapplying lessons learned at great cost during World War II. Patton's private notes reveal skepticism toward triumphal narratives, cautioning that victory narratives often obscured fragility rather than secured peace after World War II. He emphasized that cohesion, not ideology, had sustained armies under pressure, a conclusion shaped by observation throughout World War II. Patton reflected on leadership failures as much as successes, acknowledging moments where impulse had overridden judgment during World War II. He recognized that charisma could inspire action but also amplify error, a duality he had personally embodied during World War II. Patton's assessment of Allied cooperation became more critical in retrospect, identifying fractures masked by necessity during World War II. He believed that unity forged under existential threat weakened once that threat receded, a pattern he feared would repeat beyond World War II. Patton's contemplation of future conflict grew more explicit, interpreting geopolitical realignment as a continuation rather than an end to struggle after World War II. He viewed the shifting balance of power not as stability, but as transition, warning privately that unresolved rivalries would resurface after World War II. Patton's sense of foreboding contrasted sharply with public celebrations, reinforcing his isolation in the post-war environment shaped by World War II. He struggled to communicate these concerns without appearing insubordinate, a constraint that silenced much of his analysis after World War II. Patton's belief in preparedness persisted, advocating readiness even in peacetime, a stance informed by the suddenness with which World War II had erupted. He argued that complacency was the most dangerous legacy of victory, dulling awareness forged through sacrifice in World War II. Patton's understanding of military professionalism extended beyond battle, emphasizing ethical restraint and responsibility during occupation shaped by World War II. He insisted that discipline without purpose degraded into coercion, undermining legitimacy earned through hardship in World War II. Patton's frustration with policy decisions reflected deeper concern about institutional memory, fearing that hard-won insights would be lost after World War II. He believed that armies, like individuals, forgot pain quickly, necessitating deliberate remembrance of World War II's costs. Patton's personal identity, long intertwined with command, became increasingly uncertain as his role narrowed after World War II. He sought meaning in routine, history, and reflection, attempting to adapt to a life less defined by immediacy after World War II. Patton's internal dialogue revealed acceptance that his era of relevance might be closing, a realization shaped by generational change accelerated by World War II. He acknowledged that new leaders would interpret lessons differently, influenced by experiences distinct from his own during World War II. Patton's writings show moments of humility rare in his public persona, conceding that success owed as much to circumstance as skill during World War II. He recognized the role of chance, weather, enemy error, and industrial capacity in shaping outcomes during World War II. Patton's reflections on fate softened, blending belief in destiny with acceptance of randomness revealed by World War II. He understood that control was often retrospective illusion, constructed after events rather than exercised during them in World War II. Patton's final professional thoughts centered on responsibility, emphasizing that command meant bearing consequences beyond recognition during World War II. He believed that leadership required moral courage as much as physical bravery, a lesson reinforced repeatedly during World War II. Patton's concern for historical distortion intensified, fearing that oversimplification would erase complexity inherent in World War II. He worried that heroes would be flattened into symbols, stripping future generations of nuanced understanding shaped by World War II. Patton's private legacy, preserved in journals and correspondence, offered a counterweight to myth, revealing contradiction and doubt alongside confidence born of World War II. He believed that truth, however uncomfortable, honored sacrifice more fully than polished narrative after World War II. Patton's enduring preoccupation with readiness reflected belief that peace was provisional, a pause rather than an end point after World War II. He viewed vigilance not as pessimism, but as respect for history, informed by patterns observed before and during World War II. Patton's hidden insights underscore that his greatest concerns extended beyond battles won or lost, focusing instead on the unresolved human and political consequences of World War II. As time moved forward, these unspoken reflections continued to shape interpretation of his actions, revealing a commander whose deepest struggles emerged not in combat, but in confronting what World War II had truly changed and what it had left unfinished.